called evaluation research. So in the whole discussion, we can say that what we have here, we have evaluation research where we need to have certain quantitative and qualitative measures, and in explanatory research we need to go for two specific segments. The one is called purpose, and other is called method. So first I will tell you what is purpose. Purpose means you are basically defining the purpose. Okay. So basically defining the purpose for which you have initially started. Similarly, applied is basically when you have final fabrication of the things. Similarly, methods are two types of, one is called deductive and other is called inductive. They are basically reciprocal to each other, but more importantly, you have to define that which method is more or most suitable for your particular research. So basic is also pure and experimental. Like myself, I am working as an experimentalist. We used to develop the things by doing the experiments, and of course we validate our experimental data with the help of certain modeling. It is not like that when we did experimental work it is true, but we have to validate it. So for that validation we go for theoreticians. We have different models that are already fabricated and generated by various theoreticians. We fit our data into their modeling, then we finally conclude that whether the point of research of our interest is fitting in those models or not. If it is fitting in that model, it means those models are validating our research point. Okay. So similarly, we have to follow the different suits for this, like starting with the basic research. In basic research, we used to discover basic truths and laws. Okay. So you can see that we are used to find the solution to fundamental problems. So basic research deals with the basic fundamental problems, basic truths and basic laws. Okay. So what approach we follow? We used to have knowledge for knowledge sake. We can say that means we need to have a knowledge for basic knowledge sake and done out of more curiosity. So it is basically an attempt to arrive at new discovery and improvement over existing theory. Like a way we have LCR circuit in our physics and electronics. Okay, so we have already LCR principles, those are existing long years back. But we used to develop a new model, new set of experiments where we can follow the same suit but via different route. Or you can say that there is already a existing theory, we are just trying to improving it. We are just trying to add few wings to its cap, that this is also feasible. But finally, in the basic research, you already making a strong point of existing theory. So the area concerned are like psychology, sociology, philosophy, and of course they cannot be applied immediately in a field situation because they have different modeling in comparison to our sciences. So next is applied research. So what is applied research? You can say to improve a product while testing theoretically. You can say what is theoretically means the theoretical concepts, those have actual problem situations. Okay. So what we are doing here, we are basically you can say that like we have theoretical concepts, we are basically testing those things, but in actual situations we are finding the solutions of actual problems via this way. So you can say we are testing the basic research theories in applied area, in actual field area. So the examples for this case are research in medicine and agriculture, improving the efficiency of home offices, and modes of transportation. Like in a case of, we have already two types of air conditioning system at our home. Like we already have HVAC system and open air cooling system. So we are simply comparing those. Like nowadays we have two types of air conditioning for our offices. One is called rotary compressing and other is called inverter compressing. So via applying those separate things, we can find out which is more efficient for that particular set of applications. Okay, so this is called applied research. Similarly, applied research is more applicable in medicine and agriculture. Nowadays, we all are suffering from a pandemic, COVID-19. So people are doing lot of research on these specific areas. Like day by day, you are finding new problems, and similarly, after very few time, you get the solution for that. So this is basically research in applied area, or you can call it as applied research. Actually, the whole things are governed by the problems. The problem define itself that which particular modeling, which particular set of models are applicable in that research problem. So this is called deductive research. You will find it a bit interesting. You know why? You can see that here we are starting with the theory. Then theory we drive to hypothesis. Then we find some observations. Observation, you apply it and you make a chart of the observation. You find the values, like after this, substituting this, you get this set of observation table. And finally you confirm it. That is called confirmation. So this is called deductive research. In inductive research, it is totally the following the reverse route, where we have most of the PhD problems are used to work with this area, because people are trying to be safer on the side, that whatever they find it should be like a new set of theory model. So similarly, we have a observation. The observation we applied repeated number of times to confirm it. Then we finally conclude to a tentative hypothesis, and finally we drive a theory. So the theory only conclude that this is an inductive research, and you started from the observation and landed at a particular set of theory. So you can see this is the comparison chart. Here we have deductive and inductive research. In deductive we have a logic, and in inductive we have experiments. You can say experiments means observing the happening of the events and finally drawing a observation chart. In deductive research you have inferences, and here we have actual observations. In deductive research, you basically, like suppose it should be like this way, and you finding the logic in that way. But in inductive research, you have an open mind that let observations come, and then we will find a specific set of relationship between them. So you can say deductive is general to specific, and inductive is specific to general. So basically, in inductive research, we have a very particular small set of observations, and we try to make it generalize. Like we find it whether it is applicable to all others or not. So you can say deductive research is descriptive research, and inductive research is hypothesis testing. So they are basically moving parallel to each other, but they're totally moving in a reverse way. So people used to work based on the need, based on the problem, that which research is more suitable to them. Okay. Now the next step is called evaluate research. So its name suggests clearly that what is evaluate research, or you can say that by this way we can move this to the other segments. So evaluate search is for program or particular activity that we want to evaluate, or you can say the particular set of model that that we assess or appraise. So this is choosing a method, you can say, to final evaluation. So there are two methods. One is called qualitative method and other is called quantitative method. In qualitative method, we used to have case studies. So case studies of related areas that we used to find with the help of, just wait. In qualitative methods, we used to have case studies. In case studies, we have experience of similar problems or similar research group activities. So we analyze the case study. Case study help us in all the ways that how a particular fellow worked in this way. But in case study, they have all the related activities, all the related efforts that they have made in particular to that environment. So in qualitative research, we have focus groups like perceptions, opinion, beliefs, and attitudes. We have narratives. Narratives help us to come out from a specific set of problems. We have grounded theory, that is description of the steps of the process. And similarly, we have ethnography. What is ethnography? A specific word that is scientific research strategy that show you a particular path to reach your problem. So similarly, we have quantitative methods. The quantitative methods have certain benefits like cost analysis, cost effectiveness analysis. These quantitative methods also help us to find the feasibility of a problem, because most of the cases we have lot of inventions, like in case of LEDs. Before 2014, we have numerous type of LEDs, but you see how much people use, very less. But in 2014, the research came out with white LED. So white LED is a need of the hour. So we people are basically working on glass system or CFL system. But as the white LED came in the market, it is very feasible because its cost analysis clearly explained that it will be widely used. So that is, of course, there are a lot of methods. Those are applied before its launch or before using that research. It depends on, again, problem to problem, that what it will help. Okay. So these are different stages of the research process. So here we have various stages of research processes, starting from defining a problem. I show you via this particular picture that we basically have a stepwise approach where we can move from one particular point to the end, and there are various stages starting from its definition. Then we go for formulation and development of hypothesis, then we determining the research design, and similarly we have identifying information types and its sources. So we have determining sample plan and sample size. We have a data collection systems, data collection methods, and those data is finally analyzed. That is called data analysis. So in the last point, we used to have prepare and presenting that research report. So starting with the first step, that is called defining a problem. So there is a famous quote that if you have find out your problem, or if you have well defined your problem, it is half solved. Why it is so? Because you know by which path you will go ahead to the final end. So a well defined problem is half solved because well defined problem will itself tell you which methodology is the best suitable for your research. So the most important step in research process is defining the problem. The process involved in defining the problem is basically statement of a problem in general way. So you can define the problem in a such way that it could help you in finding out the exact route to reach the end. So it help you in understanding the nature of problem, that what kind of problem you are taking. So it is helping you in surveying the available literature, developing the ideas through discussion. So you can discuss with your fellow colleagues, with your seniors, to find out the point that how it can be further solved. So similarly, we can have rephrasing the research problem. So sometimes we are moving in a wrong way. So when you have proper survey of the literature available, you can land at a point that this could be only the best way to move ahead instead of moving to a wrong path. So similarly, when you discuss with the seniors or colleagues, you may automatically get a confirmed path to move in a right way. So you can say a well-defined problem is basically half solved. So formulation and development of working hypothesis. You can see the picture where you have to move on a one of the path. So basically, it will help you to decide which path you have to follow, because one wrong path will take you farther away than your specific path. So you will definitely go to a wrong way far ahead. So it is basically, you can say, a proposed explanation made on the basis of limited evidence. Like when you start with a research problem, of course, you can say that particular fellow may have a limited evidence, because the fellow is already finding out the solution to a problem. So you can say that this is a evidence as a starting point for further investigation. The point of discussion is here that this is a decision point, that in which way you need to proceed. So it is again essential that we require a specific, testable and predictable statement driven by theoretical guidance and prior evidence. So a hypothesis can be evaluated in various research design. In experimental setting, you can see that the different paths, or the researchers compare two or more group of research participants to investigate the difference of research problems. So by this way, you can develop your own hypothesis. You can develop your working hypothesis. Uh, those will define that how you can move ahead with the system. Like, see, I have tried to show it with this null versus alternate hypothesis. So left hand side, this is null hypothesis, and right hand side is alternative hypothesis. So what is null hypothesis? In null hypothesis, we have a statement about population parameters. Okay, we test the likelihood of this statement being true in order to decide what to accept or reject our alternative hypothesis. So if we accept, then it's a final theory, but if we reject it, then we have an alternative hypothesis. So what is alternative hypothesis? It's again a statement that directly contradicts the null hypothesis, means not this, that way. So basically we determine whether or not to accept or reject this statement. So we can say that, we can say that we finally conclude on likelihood of the null hypothesis, means opposite hypothesis being true. So we can also include the symbol that it is greater than or less than or not equal to sign, depends on its type. So the next thing is determining the research design. Determining the research design basically help us to finally conclude that this particular model or this particular research design is suitable for us. Research design step involves development of research plan for carrying out the study. So there are number of alternative research designs. The choice will largely depend on research purpose. Basically, the research purpose will help you to rethink about the alternative research design that you have. There are three main types of designs for research. The starting with data collection, measurement, and analysis. A design that produces the least margin of error in experimental research is generally considered the desired outcome. So, the research design will also help you uh, to find the best alternative research. The different available research design will help you to find the best option among the best solutions. So identifying the information, or you can say the different types of sources. So there are two types of data sources like secondary data and primary data. Secondary data are those which have been collected by someone else and which have already passed through statistical process. So you can say that you are working in the area of statics, or you are working in the area of sciences. Somebody have already developed some hypothesis, somebody already have done that research, and they have already set a specific set of data. So that is a secondary data for you, because that is not directly applicable in your research, but you are somehow related to that. Now, the important point is that you are not the original owner of that data. It could be like information available on the websites, information given by the governments, or information given by the particular societies. Those are working in those specific problems. So similarly, we have primary data, so which are collected by you, which is collected in a recent time, or those which are collected as a fresh and for the first time, and it thus happen to be original in character because you have itself find it. So that is why it is one kind of fresh data for you. So this is basically identification of information sources. So there are two always specific set of sources, one you collect and one you use. The use is commonly a secondary data. So that is why I mentioned secondary data first, because when you start your research, initially you find out that this data is particularly used by other fellows, but that data is not basically meant for you, but it will help you to find the path for moving in that research area. The primary data is to be generated and collected by you, so you will generate your own data. So the next thing is determine the sample size. So what is sample size? Broadly, sample size is just the number of samples. So if you are doing a trials on humans, the number of persons those are appearing for your sample. Like in India, we have trials on Covishield and Covaxin. So similarly, those particular fellows, 1 lakh or 10,000 or 50,000, those come up uh, for that vaccine initially. Those define the sample size. So this is basically target population or universe. Okay, the population to which the investigator wants to generalize this result. So next is sample unit. Sample unit is basically smallest unit for which the sample can be selected. Sampling frame. Sampling frame is a list from which the potential respondents are drawn. Sampling scheme is the method of selecting sample units for sampling frame. So similarly, the samples are basically selected respondents which are originally you had in a sample. So you can say that via this way Why this way? All these fellows are fall among the sample size. Then we have a sample unit, and then we have a target population. So sample is basically small part of the whole universe, and sampling unit is collection of these samples. And target population is the area of research in which you are working. So you can say all these are basically working in their own domain. So they are separated from the researcher itself, that these things have up to this margin or up to this limit. So similarly, it is more interesting to know why we go for sampling. So sampling is important because without sampling, you are not able to define that what we are finding. So a population can be defined as including all people or items with the characteristics one wishes to understand. So basically, we are finding the behavior of particular group. So the population where we are finding that behavior is basically our sample. So for that particular job, we need a sampling, because there are very rare enough time or money to gather the information from everyone or everything in a population. The goal becomes finding a representative sample of that population. So what is a good sample? The sample must be, yes, representative of the population. It must be appropriately sized. It must be unbiased, and it must be random. So the random sampling is more important, because more random is the sample, better the data collection. Because if some particular type of population you have missed, it means there is some lapses in your research. Secondly, it must be unbiased, that you should not do that. This is easy accessible to me, so let's do a sampling on that. The other thing is appropriately sized. You should not make a big size and not even a tiny size. If you select a tiny size, it will take too much of time for your search. It may be appropriate that in that particular time behavior of all those may have changed. So it should be appropriately sized, that the whole work done must be carried out in a particular set of period. Then is representative of the population. Uh, the representative of the population basically define that this whole population have, this whole good sample have similar characteristics. So these are the four properties that define a good sample from the population. So similarly, when we go for a sampling, it is always important to go for good sample to move to a good research. So there are types of sampling: probability sampling and non-probability sampling. In probability sampling, we have method of sampling that uses of random selection, so that all units cases in the population have an equal probability of being chosen. So we have simple random sampling, systematic random sampling, and stratified random sampling, and finally cluster sampling. In comparison to probability sampling, we have non-probability sampling that does not involve random selection, and methods are not based on rationale of probability theory. So here we have convenience sampling, quota sampling, judgment sampling, and snowball sampling. Their names are in particular defining all the things. In particular, they are explaining the things in this way. So here you can see that we have different sets. Those are showing different types of sampling, like random sampling, systematic sampling, stratified sampling, and cluster sampling. In simple sampling, we simply have a pick and choose method. So in systematic sampling, we have a particular set of system in that defines sample to be taken after particular time or after particular quantity. In stratified sampling, we segregate the samples separately and we define the persons those have similar characteristic in that society. In cluster sampling, we have a variety of clusters and we select one person, one particular person from that cluster. So this is called cluster sampling. Via this way, we can say that there are, of course, potential errors. Uh, we have to tap out the potential sources of those errors. So the larger the size is, there is more likely that error in the sample will decrease. And but beyond a certain point, increasing sample size does not help us. It does not provide large reduction in sampling error. So we can conclude that accuracy is a reflection of sampling error and confidence level of the data. So like in this PPT, we have defined the random sampling error and non-sampling error. In non-sampling error, we have a response error and non-response error. Like in response error, we work on that, and the response error could be due to researcher error, interviewer error, or respondent error. What if researcher error? That the particular researcher may have certain wrong units, they have used a wrong sampling frame or that wrong data analysis method. So that error is caused from the side of researcher itself. Similarly, the other thing is interviewer error. In interviewer error, we have used to get the data from interviewer questionnaire. In that defined set, when we are gathering the information, we are gathering the data, it may be the error caused at that point. So it could be due to questioning, due to recording, or maybe cheating. So similarly, respondent error is inability error. You can say some particular sample where we are collecting the data is not feeling comfortable or unwillingly giving you the data. So those are called respondent errors. So similarly, we have to tap out the potential sources of error. Similarly, random sampling error means suppose we have somehow pick up a wrong sample, a wrong sample point, which is random, but it is not representing all the properties of its surrounding society. So there are different types of errors and we have to tap out those errors. The other thing is data analysis design. So there are different sources of data. One is called primary data and other is called secondary data. So data collection is again an important point where we can find out how they are working. So in primary data, there are different ways to collect primary data. Like we have observation method. In observation method, we are basically not involved indirectly, or we have direct observation of the process. We are observing the process and collecting the data. The other thing is interview method, that you are particularly collecting the data by personal, structural, or telephonic way. In that person, you are collecting the data via certain specific set of interview questions or questionnaire method. The other thing is, other data collection is schedule method. So it is normally used in telemetry systems where we have schedule collection of data. It is normally stored and retrieved by using certain terminals like computers, laptops, and cameras. So telemetry system is a best example, that is collecting the data from certain distance where it is not feasible to go on routine basis or it is a hazardous situation. So similarly, we have experiments and surveys. We are personally doing the experiments and personally conducting the different surveys to collect that data. So all those are basically primary source of data. So similarly, there are secondary source of data. In secondary data sources, we have publication of center, state, or local governments. As I told you in earlier slide, these are available on the internet, in the newspapers, or standard data books. So it could be a technical or trade journals, it could be a book, magazine, or newspaper, or more or less there are public reports and private reports. Those are available physically or online. So we can use those reports. Those are validated from the particular agencies or local governments or center or state governments. So we are simply using that data in our research is basically secondary data. So, but we must take care of certain factors which must be considered before using secondary data. The first thing is the reliability of data. Because in secondary sources, the reliability of data is always a point of interest, because always the data is not reliable. So who, when, and by which method we have collected the data is more important. We also must ensure that the agency that has published the data should be reliable. So similarly, there is suitability of data concept, means the object, scope, and nature of original inquiry should be studied. So as if the study was different objective, then the data is not suitable for a current study. Means you are finding certain solution to a problem, but that data collection has been done with other things in mind, like we are trying to have economical method of developing some medicine to a particular problem, and the data was collected with a particular set that we need to cover up this problem, where the cost was not important at all. So that data is not suitable for it. So basically, suitability of data is also important when you have the basic preamble of the data. The thing is adequacy of data. So it is necessary to use adequate data to avoid biases and prejudices leading to incorrect conclusion. So all the factors must be considered specific in case of primary data usage to the problem. So similarly, the primary data also have certain advantages and disadvantages. The advantages are like that we can resolve specific research issues, we can have better accuracy, a higher level of control, up-to-date information, and of course, more importantly, you are the owner of the information. You can also know the basic idea behind the data collection. So primary data is always helpful. It is always more prone towards the solution. Primary data is always helpful because it is collected by taking the exact target of the research. Similarly, if there are certain disadvantage also, because when you go for primary data, you have to invest more. So of course it is more expensive. You have to devote the time also. So it is time consuming. So there are certain specific limits also. So it is not feasible to always have a primary data collection. And of course it is not always possible. When you have to collect the data to a particular, you can say remote locations, in that case it is more disturbing to collect that data. So secondary data also have certain advantages and disadvantages. Advantages is that it is very easy available, so you have ease of access, like data is available on the website, you simply download it and use it. So of course it is low cost, or sometimes from the government agencies it is free. Since you need not to invest the time, so it is time saving method, and we are generating new insights and understanding from previous analysis. So anyone can collect the data because it is available for everyone. So, but there is also one thing that it is collected on a large target base. So the larger sample size is also available there. Now there are certain disadvantages of secondary data also, that they are not specific to your work. So they are not specific for your research, because when the data was collected, they are not well aware about your particular problem. So you can say lack of control over data. When the data flow is moving towards some other target, you cannot control it. So quality is also compromised here. There may be certain biasness based on the easiness or comfort zone of the data collection agency. So of course it is not timely, and of course it is not proprietary information. So there are certain advantages and disadvantages also for secondary data. There is ease of access and cost effective. There is disadvantage of non-specific to your problem, and of course it is maybe sometimes biased data. So data analysis, what is data analysis? Data analysis is a process of inspecting, cleansing, transforming and modeling data with goal of discovering useful information conclusion and supporting decision making. So data analysis is basically the process of inspecting the original form of data. So of course you can move towards the modeling of the data. There are particular models you have to fit your data and find that whether it is suitable for your particular search or not. So other thing is universal analysis and Vibrate analysis. So the first one is simplest form of quantitative analysis. So carried out with the description of a single variable in terms of applicable units of the analysis. So it could be done in table format or with a bar chart or a similar form of graphical representation. In Vibrate analysis means we are using multiple variables. So it involves two variables deal with causes or relationships. Major purpose is to explain it. So one is the simplest form of the quantitative analysis. So in order to see if the variables are related to one another, it is common to measure how those who two variables simultaneously change together. Like in case of our measurement at distance, we used to employ XT recorders. In XT recorders, we have two variables, those are change. So one may be distance with the time, or one may be volume with the time. So volume, density, whatever variables you have selected, you need to note down their variation with respect to time. So that is called bivariate analysis. So there are different types of analysis. Those are available with us. So starting with descriptive analysis, exploratory analysis, uh, informational analysis, predictive analysis, causal analysis, and mechanistic analysis. So descriptive analysis means it is describing or summarizing the total set of data. The explanatory is basically examine or further exploration of the data, and we lead till the end when we find the relationship between the variables which are previously unknown. Informational analysis using a small sample of data to infer about a large population. Predictive analysis is using historical or current data to find patterns to make prediction about the future. Causal analysis looks at the cause and effect of relationship between variables and finding the cause of correlation. So similarly, mechanistic analysis is to understand the exact changes in the variables that lead to other changes in the respected variable. Like we have distance and time. So we can see that the exact changes in distance and time that may change the volume and density of that particular process. So the last our concern is basically preparing and presenting final research report. In final research report, when we go ahead, we must ensure that it it can be easily readable for someone else who has not done this research, because the fellow who is doing the research is easily familiar with all the pros and cons, all the hidden points to that. But report writing is basically in such a way that we must be ensure that the other third person who are going to use this information must be able to read it. So this is the important step for preparing and presenting final research report. Sometimes we call it as final report, sometimes we call it as dissertation, sometimes we call it as thesis. There are different names to this. So it again depends the target of the research. A research report is basically presentation of research findings in the form of a report. And of course, it is necessary part of this research process. The report basically explains the whole quanta of your research. The research report presents that the stepwise approach from where you have started and how you reach at the conclusion. So the purpose of this research report is to communicate the result with interested parties. So reporting is the end product of research activity. So those are supposed to use your research. Those interested parties who are interested in your research, they must be communicated via this report. So this reporting is basically the final conclusion, the final end discussion of the whole research, starting from data collection to the analysis or to the modeling. So there should be essential components, I suppose. Those must be taken care while writing this report. So it must be clear and coherence with the area of research. It must be written correctly. That sometimes there are certain deviation when you go for modeling and analysis of the data. So those things must be specifically mentioned in this way. So similarly, objective and brevity of the report must be considered. That you should not deviate from the target, you should not deviate from the purpose of doing that research. Means the objective must be clear that we have started from this point and our target is reached at this point. So it must be styled to the reader's taste. It should not be boring enough, or it should not use a certain specific language that may cause a trouble to the readers. So it must be taken care that it should be styled to the reader's taste. Other thing is readability. So the presentation form must be adequate enough that it is in the form of reading. So the user can be read easily. Now it is your decision. You should make a hardbound, you should make a online, or you should make a self voice explanatory type of reporting. So other thing is continuity of ideas. The whole ideas, those you have defined initially in your abstract or in your objective, they must be continuously linked till the conclusion. Means the ideas though you have explored in case of literature survey, they must be applicable or they must be adequately used in the analysis part up to end. So it should be consistent to the information or it should be consistent to the target. So there is a need of planning and organizing the report also. So means you should make a proper plan of its chapters, of its units or subheadings. it should be properly organized in such a way that the user must find the path to read it. It should not be like left over at any point. It should be continuous and self-explanatory. So avoiding personal opinion is again an important point that I have mentioned. You should write the report based on the facts only. You should write the report based on the data that you have collected. The personal opinion may be different. We humans may have liking and disliking problems, but the report writing of the research must be based on the facts and the data collection. So the personal opinion must be avoided in this, specifically when you are writing a black and white report. The other thing is that it must show interest and appeal. Interest and appeal mean to say that the report must create the interest of the reader. It should not be boring enough that the person who is reading the first 2-3 pages and find it is not interesting. It should be appealing. When the person has started reading the report, the fellow should conclude till end. So means the writing a report is again a technique by which you can continuously uh, save the interest of the reader. The reader at any point should not left over the reading. The target is to that you should explore only that much point. You should elaborate that much point, that there should always be a tendency in such a way that they find that next page will be better than this. So in a conclusion to this report writing, I must say that the report must uh, deliberately show its meaning, its purpose. Secondly, it should have clear have definitions of the objectives, clear have definition of the research, and the report must have a good characteristics that the user will find it useful for the society, and society can use it for its improvement with the upcoming days. So the report writing is basically the whole uh, final quanta of the research. If the report writing is not up to the mark, so nobody will emphasize it and nobody will use it. So you can say that the report writing is the final conclusion of the feasibility of the research, because the research that you have used must have used so many resources of the society, so many resources of the institution, and so much sources of our surrounding. So it is our basic duty that that report or that research report must be useful to the society. So it must be ensured that the research that you have done must be utilized by the society. So this is possible only and only if your report is self-explanatory. It could be used by some other fellows in upcoming time. So the report writing basically explain the zest of the story of research. So I divide the whole section in the whole report writing in 3 ways. It is more important that lot of our students, our colleagues, they usually have done a excellent research, but they are not able to present it. So the whole information stuck via that way, because nobody can read our mind. So the fellows who can read is basically your research report. So I divide the whole segment in 3 parts. The first is preliminaries, the text, the reference material. In preliminaries, we have a title page. In title page, we simply have name of the project. We simply have year of its starting, year of its submission, and the related or funded institutions. Specifically define the purpose. Then we have a preface. In preface, we have the idea that from where we have started and who have helped us in carrying out this research. Similarly, we have table of contents, unit wise or subhead wise, that how we move from unit 1 to conclusion last unit. Similarly, we have list of tables and figures, so that the larger table and figure is not that the research is up to the mark. So the table and figure basically help us to the user, to the reader, to find out the particular search. Yes. Okay. The next thing is text. In text, we have abstract, the abstract of the whole search. Introduction. In introduction, we have literature survey. We have the idea behind this research and other things. Then we have research procedure. In search procedure, we must define the methodology of doing the research. हाँ जी सर, कोई है प्रॉब्लम?
Yes, please. It's a humble request to all the participants. Please mute yourself as the session is going on. Sir, please continue and sorry for the inconvenience.
It's okay. So, मुझे लगा किसी का कोई प्रॉब्लम किसी ने पूछना है. It's okay. So similarly, we have research problems, we have research methodology, and finally we have different models. So different models are those we have used in this PhD research or in this particular research survey. They must be mentioned. So finally, we land at a particular results. We must justify that this particular model is used and these results are validated with the help of this model. So finally, we have discussion. In discussion, we have inputs from the surrounding groups. And we have conclusion and the summary in the end. In the conclusion and the summary, we conclude the whole research to a particular end result. In that case, we either devise we have some fabrication of the device, or we have certain set of rules that we have found by this way. And summary also define that how we started, how we worked, how we concluded, and how we finally reported. So this summary is basically summarizing the whole research process. It is summarizing the whole years, whole months of your research, that how you move toward the final conclusion. The finally more important is reference material nowadays, because earlier you can write and you can publish it, but nowadays there is more importance to the plagiarism. So now in government as well as private universities, in funding agencies, they all want plagiarism reports. So earlier we have only 1 or 2 plagiarism systems. Those are universally selected, like Turnitin and others. But now we also have our own Urkund logins. Those help us to find the level of plagiarism. And of course, it is more important to do the plagiarism checking. But more or less, it should be ethically correct that we must acknowledge the research of particular fellow. So for that, we need to write the reference materials with the proper format and taking all the ethical measures during the writing. So here we have bibliography. So in bibliography, we need to follow a particular format, whether the described by university or funding agency or others. So similarly, we have appendices and we have index, if any. So index means suppose you have particular charts or particular plots, those are not commonly used, you can mention that. And of course, you can mention the page number of all those. So for delivering this talk, I have also consulted various fellows, and I thanks to my Department of Physics, Punjab University, those who help us to find the different sources or different research journals and research thesis of the department. I also acknowledge my research scholar Sakshi Saini, being a research scholar in this department, who helped me a lot in finding and in reviewing the whole presentation. So thank you very much, everyone. So these are my contact details. If anyone have any query related to search or doing the search, please let me know. I will be very helpful, and of course very happy to help my colleagues in the research paradigm. So thank you very much for everyone. So I think the session is open for any query if you people have, please.
Thank you so much, Dr. Manish Dev Sharma. So I think it was a wonderful talk. I hope it will help to all the participants, irrespective of their level, because you described the things starting from the definition of the research, various types, and that was a wonderful because you also added the examples. So now the session is open for the discussions. Participants, you can ask your queries. Because I was reading that some of the participants, they left their queries while the lecture was going on. So now you can raise your queries. Yes, anybody? Because I think they have mentioned in the chat. So, yes, sir. They have written like what is the difference between ex post fact and experimental research?
तो 4 बजे क्लास है अभिनव का
मैम क्या एक बार रिपीट करेंगे?
Yeah, sure, sir. What is the difference between ex post fact and experimental research?
Actually, in ex post fact is basically when suppose you have done the research and you finally concluded in that. But with the passage of time, there are some other factors, those are coming up in related to that research. So those are ex facto, means post to that research. Like we have done research on 5 factors or 6 factors. So with the passage of time, there may be arising a new factor. So that research must be done again, but with a limited resource that must include that new factor. So this is called post factor. Yes, please.
Yes, anybody else?
Normally in projects, we usually write it the scope for future research. So this is the only difference that. But you can use that post facto for your publication also, because you are the whole mastermind behind that whole research. You just add it with the passage of time, but you can publish it also. But it won't be published in the full report, but it will be published as a separate paper only. Yes, please.
Thank you.
Hello, good evening, sir.
Yes, sir.
Yeah, this is Ashok Kumar, sir.
Yes, sir.
Sir, regarding the publication, I have some doubt in that. This undergraduate projects, UG projects, especially B students, usually they do the project work. Where to publish these papers actually, because there not been much of research-oriented nature. Just to we get a doubt that where to publish these kind of papers for particularly B students papers.
Thank you. It's really a good question, and I will be happy to respond it. Sir, may I know your name?
Ashok Kumar, sir.
अशोक जी, आप कहाँ से हैं?
सर मैं महाराष्ट्र सोलापुर सर, इंजीनियरिंग कॉलेज फैकल्टी.
ओके ओके. अशोक जी, ऐसे है कि देखिए दो तरह के पब्लिकेशंस होती हैं, एक तो जर्नल्स में या पीयर रिव्यूड जर्नल्स में जाती है। कुछ पब्लिकेशंस ऐसी भी हैं जो आप मैगजीन्स में दे सकते हैं, जिनके पास ISBN नंबर होता है या ISSN नंबर होता है। जैसे मैं पर्टिकुलरली आपको बता रहा हूँ, एक हमारा मंथली जर्नल आता है तो वो मैगजीन, बट उसका नाम है जर्नल, उसका नाम है IAPT जर्नल। तो उसमें क्या करते हैं, वो हर बार 5 ऐसी पब्लिकेशंस लेते हैं जो स्टूडेंट्स ने की हो या टीचर ने की हो स्टूडेंट के साथ। तो जैसे मान लीजिए आपका मैं आपकी ब्रांच पूछ सकता हूँ कौन से एरिया?
सिविल इंजीनियरिंग सर।
सिविल इंजीनियरिंग में मान लीजिए आपने किसी मटेरियल पे रिसर्च की, ठीक है, बॉन्डिंग मटेरियल लिया आपने या स्ट्रेंथन मटेरियल लिया, या आपने मटेरियल की स्ट्रेंथ टेस्ट करने के लिए कोई मेथड है, जैसे आपके पास UTM होती है, यूनिवर्सल टेस्टिंग मशीन, अगर मैं गलत ना हूँ,
यस सर, यस सर।
तो आपने UTM मशीन का बच्चों के साथ मिलके कोई अल्टरनेटिव मेथड ढूंढा कि इसके साथ भी आप कोई इंडिजिनस टेक्निक आपने डेवलप कर दी कि जो लो कॉस्ट मटेरियल है उनकी मटेरियल की स्ट्रेंथ की टेस्टिंग हम UTM की बजाय इस मेथड से कर सकते हैं। या आपके एक मेथड होता है NDT, नॉन डिस्ट्रक्टिव टेस्टिंग।
यस यस, होता
तो
कॉन्क्रीट के लिए होता है।
NDT का आपने अलग से कोई मेथड निकाल दिया, तो उसके आप 4 to 5 पेजेस ऐसे जो एजुकेशनल जर्नल्स हैं, या अमेरिका में एक जर्नल आता है अमेरिकन फिजिक्स टीचर्स जर्नल, उनमें आप भेज सकते हैं। या GYA का न्यूज़लेटर आता है, ग्लोबल यंग एकेडमी का न्यूज़पेपर आता है, हर एक मंथ वो छपता है, ऑनलाइन आता है, तो उनमें आप ये चीजें सेंड कर सकते हैं। उसका बेनिफिट ये रहेगा, उनकी नंबरिंग भी है, दे आल्सो हैव ISN ISBN नंबर, और वो आपका रेफरेंस में भी जाएगा। सो आप वहां ट्राई कर सकते हैं। मेरे पास वैसे उसकी कॉपीज पड़ी हैं, आप मेरी कांटेक्ट डिटेल है, अगर
प्लीज
आप मुझे
सर,
ईमेल
प्लीज
लिख
सर। हाँ,
दें
यस सर,
तो
यस
मैं
सर।
आपको आपको उनकी सॉफ्ट कॉपी भेज दूंगा, उस पे आपको उनकी कांटेक्ट डिटेल मिल जाएगी, आप उनसे कांटेक्ट कर सकते हैं।
कैसे सर, ये जैसे स्कोपस वगैरह गए तो इतना वो वहाँ पे चांसेस नहीं होता एक्सेप्ट
उनमें
होने का।
थोड़े से चांसेस कम होते हैं,
हाँ, इसके लिए सर, इसके लिए वो बहुत
रीजन।
सारा हमने देखा है सर, बच्चों डिस्करेज हो जाता है जैसा उनका पेपर रिजेक्ट होता है, तो दे विल बी गेट डिस्करेज। सो हम सोचे कि थोड़ा बेसिक लेवल पे जो कौन सी प्लेटफॉर्म है जहाँ पे बच्चों को पब्लिकेशन कर सकते हैं।
देखिए अशोक जी, पहले तो मैं बड़ा इम्प्रेस्ड हूँ आपकी बात से कि आप बच्चों के बारे में इतना सोचते हैं। अदरवाइज सिस्टम ही ऐसा है कि टीचरों के पास इतना सोचने का टाइम नहीं है जिस लेवल पे आप सोच रहे हैं। इट इज रियली हैप्पी टू हियर फ्रॉम यू कि आप जो हमारा बेसिक टारगेट स्टूडेंट है उसके बारे में इतना सोच रहे हैं। और सेकेंडली, जहां तक आपने उनको एनकरेज रखना है, डिस्करेज नहीं होना है, तो आप एक दो बार मैं रिक्वेस्ट करूंगा आप इनमें ट्राई करिए, उनको एक बार पब्लिकेशन का फ्लेवर दीजिए, जैसे वो
हाँ,
अपना
यस सर।
नाम इस तरह से मैगजीन में या पब्लिकेशन जर्नल्स में, नेशनल लेवल के जर्नल्स में एक बार वो अपना नाम देखेंगे तो वो
बहुत खुश
खुद
हो
ही
जाएगा।
ज्यादा एफर्ट करना
बहुत
शुरू
बहुत
कर
सर,
देंगे।
बहुत आगे जाके बहुत एफर्ट लेते सर वो।
जी, आई अप्रिशिएट योर एफर्ट्स इन दिस
थैंक
फील्ड।
यू सर, नाइस प्रेजेंटेशन सर,
थैंक
थैंक यू
यू
सो मच।
अभिषेक, थैंक यू। हाँ जी मैम, कोई और क्वेरी है तो?
Yeah, yes. Sir, I am Dr. Reshma Nikhat from Management branch here in Hyderabad. And we have research scholars, and even though we want to have a paper, nowadays it is a requisite that we should have a paper in UGC care journals, which has really become a tough task for us to get it published. What are your suggestions in this, sir?
मैम ऐसे है, देखिए अगर आप उसे थोड़ा सा एक्सप्लोर करें, यूजीसी हैव गिवन 2 टाइप्स ऑफ ऑप्शंस। द फर्स्ट ऑप्शन इज यूजीसी केयर जर्नल, जिसमें जर्नल कुछ हटा दिए जाते हैं। कई बार उसमें इशू क्या आता है, मान लीजिए आपने 2020 में मान लीजिए आपने उसमें पब्लिकेशन किया एंड 2021 में वो केयर लिस्ट से बाहर हो गया, सो और आपकी प्रमोशन है 22 में, तो उस केस में ऐसे इश्यूज आते हैं। बट मैं आपको रिकमेंड करूंगा, यूजीसी ने एक और भी अल्टरनेटिव दिया हुआ है कि उनकी साइट पे जो यूजीसी केयर के बजाय वेब ऑफ साइंस की लिस्ट भी है। तो जो वेब ऑफ साइंस के जर्नल्स हैं वो भी उतने ही रिकॉग्नाइज्ड हैं जितने केयर वाले। तो आप एक बार थोड़ा सा वेब ऑफ साइंस की आप एक बार लिस्ट देख लीजिए, उसमें आपको जर्नल्स काफी ज्यादा मिल जाएंगे केयर लिस्ट से, बट उनकी भी उतनी ही वैल्यू है जितनी केयर वालों की है। आप वेब ऑफ साइंस को एक लिस्ट को एक बार आप मैं रिक्वेस्ट करूंगा आप उसको एक्सप्लोर करें,
Thank you.
नेट पे देखें।
Thank you. Definitely, sir. Thank you so much.
हाँ जी, कोई और है?
We would like to get this presentations. If it is possible, can you share with us, sir?
हाँ जी, डेफिनेटली मैं आपको भेज दूंगा। मेरी डिटेल है इस पे, स्क्रीन पे शायद शो हो रही है, कॉन्टैक्ट डिटेल्स। अगर आप उस पे यू प्लीज राइट ए सिंगल लाइन that I have attended your presentation on this session and please share your PPT. I will definitely send a PPT on that particular place. No problem at all.
Excuse me, sir.
Yes.
Sir, to write a journal paper, what is the order of writing? Like first introduction, literature, or result? Which one
Yes.
should we write first?
Yes. Yes.
Could you please elaborate on this, sir?
Dear
This is-
professor, I think your voice is a bit disturbing. So let me tell you what you want. I think you want that writing a search paper is of course a specific technique. You need to know how to write it. Is it?
Yes, sir. Yes, sir.
Okay. So okay. It is not a cumbersome option to write this. Let me tell you, it is very easy to write a search paper because if you have a data and if you have interest in that particular search area, you just find 2, 3, 4, 5 papers easily. Okay. So suppose you have a research in, may I know what is your search area or what is your stream?
Mechanical engineering, sir. Mechanical engineering.
Mechanical. Okay.
Yes, sir.
Okay. Suppose in mechanical engineering you are working on computer integrated manufacturing. So in computer integrated manufacturing, you just download two or three papers on Kaizen or total preventive maintenance or destructive testing, like this way. So fine, you just check the taste, how they write, what they write in the introduction, what they write in methods, and how they apply certain models. Okay. But before that, I recommend you just study 5 papers of your interest, whether all are related to Kaizen or related to just in time or all are related to total preventive maintenance. Just write 5 papers and just make a conclusion of those papers along with their process. That is called a review paper. You first start writing a review paper from 5 or 6 papers. Just write a 2 and 3 reviews from these 5 or 6 set of papers. You will gain a confidence, and more importantly, you will also find what is there inside of research paper. What is the demand of research papers and what is the method to write a research paper. So after that, I assure you, you will definitely write a research paper after 3 or 4 review papers. Even I did in this way. I started my career in 2003 and till 2005, I write 3-4 review papers in the length of 2 years. Now papers are coming up every year based on my research. It is easy way. So just try to do that, I suggest.
Thank you, sir. Shall I in the chapters, which chapter should I write first, sir? Like results or introduction or literature? In writing journal paper, which part should be written first?
Like first is introduction, then you write a literature survey.
In the same order shall I write, sir? Otherwise, first I should write results, and then I'll go back to introduction, then literature survey, or something like that. Which order is better, sir? Hello,
Are you here, sir? I think there was a network issue. Something went wrong. I think all of the queries have been addressed by the expert. And moreover, he has shared his email ID and the contact number. If you find any difficulty or queries, you can drop your message. But still, if you have any issue, you can also ask to the coordinator of the next session that will be held tomorrow. So hopefully it will be a best for all of us. And thank you so much.
Thank you.
Tomorrow's session will be at 9:45.
Ma'am, attendance link, ma'am.
Yeah, it was already shared with you, ma'am. I have shared it so many times.
Okay. Is it in the chat box? Because I did
Yeah,
not see that.
yeah, it is in the chat box.
Thank you. Thank you.
Yes, please, session is over, so you may leave.
Ma'am, good evening, ma'am. Can I start?